Hello and welcome. This is going to be an episode on guard clauses and TryGetComponent. So I have a scene set up here for a player, and what I want this player to do is I want this player to be able to move, and I want this player to be able to crouch. We're going to start with those two. So I have a scene set up here, and we're just going to focus on moving and crouching. So how would we do moving and crouching normally? Via screen point to array. So if I wanted to do this, I would set this up in an update method. So simple movement, and what we can do is we can take all this stuff and we're just going to move it into here. Now this is called separation of concerns. You don't want to have everything in one big update method because then it's hard to glean out the information at a glance. So if I were to close this out, I can literally just call move here and I can go, oh, I'm able to just move. And that's so much cleaner than having everything in update. We need to apply that to our guy here. Main camera. Now I click a location and we move to that location. Amazing. So that's great. So we have our script here and it works, right? We move to that location, but there is a better way to do this, right? So we have a block of code here and a block of code here. That's all well and good. But if we want to be able to even easier, if that's a word, look at this, we would do something called guard clauses. Now, a guard clause is, instead of having separate blocks of individual code, what we have is one clause that prevents everything below it from happening. So instead of having the block of code look like this, what I can do is I can set this to is not moving and return early. This is an early return, and now I'm moving those pieces. Now instead of having two sets of curly braces, I just have one. So now, if I am not moving, nothing after this will occur. This is what's called a guard clause. So what I can do is I can just put that here. Boom. Amazing. Now, everything's even more separated and a lot easier to read. You can do the exact same thing here. Return. Just like that. So if we're not pressing anything, then it doesn't do this stuff. Let's change this to move the player. And let's put this in here. And let's rename this to check for click. So we're separating our concerns. We're checking for the click right here. And then we're moving the player. So separating our concerns. It's really important that we separate our concerns so that when we have something that doesn't work, we can easily isolate things that are occurring. And we could even do here, just negate this, put it here, and return out. Just like that. So it's a lot simpler to look at. All this code was what it was earlier, but now it's a lot easier on the eyes. So if I click play, this should run exactly the same as it was before. Boom, look at that. Amazing. He goes to where our location was, and he stops. Now let's add some functionality for crouching. So if I wanted to implement a simple crouching system to where the player can go under this, what we can do is we can edit the capsule collider. We can set the radius to something like 0.5. Sorry, set the height to 1, and set the y to negative 0.5. Negative 0.5. So now the collider looks like that, and then the player can now slip under this thing. But we want to do that in code. So let's set it back to 0 and 2. We can do that through something called TryGetComponent. So one way to assign things is through the inspector, right? Like this. This is good if we have our objects are separated. Like our player here is a different object than our main camera. So we need to separately assign the camera here. But if we have components that are a part of player, you already know that we can do GetComponent. And then boom, we assigned the collider. But with this, we don't know if it actually assigned it. To check for this, what we're going to do is we're going to make this public for right now, and we're going to look at it when it loads up. So right now there's nothing there, and then we load into scene, it's going to assign itself. However, if we don't have a capsule collider, what happens? If we made a mistake and we don't actually have the capsule collider, what will happen is it won't give us an error. That's the important bit. It not giving us an error is very bad, because if we're doing other stuff with that collider in the future and we have it referenced and it's not actually there, then it'll error and we have to find out for ourselves where the error is coming from. One way to stop that from happening is using TryGetComponent. So instead of GetComponent, we're going to remove this. We're going to go if, and then we're going to go GameObject.TryGetComponent, and then we're going to do the type. We're going to do collider, because it's very similar to GetComponent. We're going to go out collider, the type, and we call this collider. So this is what we're doing. This gets the component collider if it's actually there. It tries to get it. So what happens here is, if it actually gets the collider, then we're going to set it. So my collider, this is our reference that is public, is going to equal this collider that we got here. So you'll see this functions the same exact way as GetComponent, but what will happen is, if it doesn't get the collider, we can do other stuff, like with an else statement. Very important. See, it grabbed it. TryGetComponent grabbed it. So now, if we don't have the collider, what can we do? We can throw an exception. So throw, or best to do a debug.log. Debug.log error. So now we're doing erroring. We're error catching. So we have the collider reference here. It's nothing. And we don't have a collider on the player. Very important. So what will happen is, boom, see, it errored. Now that we know, oh, I don't have a collider on this player. Let's go assign it. And so it's just telling yourself that this happened. And what we can do with this is we can actually we can tone this down a lot more into a guard clause. So remember what guard clauses were? It's this little return thingy here, right? So what we can do is we can negate this. So now it's checking if the TryGetComponent failed. So if it failed, we return. But if it didn't fail, it continues the code afterwards. So now we have access to the out, and we just set it here. So this is a lot simpler than what we had before, right? So this is what we had before, right? And this is what it is now. Boom, 2 lines. This will work the exact same way. And instead of doing a return, what we can do is we can do a throw new exception. Throw new system.exception. And we can do the same exact thing as a debug.log and just go player. Did not find a collider to assign to. And just go to close that off. So now we have that error checking and a guard clause all in one. So now remember, we don't have that collider assigned, and now it'll throw an exception or an error. Same thing basically. Boom. See, look, exception, player did not find collider assigned to. And if we give that player a capsule collider, now it'll assign it, because TryGetComponent gets the component. Boom, and assign it. So what are the benefits of this over GetComponent? Here you have no error checking. You don't know if you actually got the component that you're looking for. And then with TryGetComponent, you have error checking. With GetComponent, you cannot guard clause it. Cannot guard clause. Messier code. Bigger sections / blocks. So it's harder to debug. Harder to debug. With your TryGetComponent, you can guard clause. Amazing. cleaner, shorter code, smaller sections, more readable, easier to debug. Isn't that amazing? So quite obvious what you should be using. Definitely try GetComponent over GetComponent. Alright, if we want to apply this to that crouching functionality, we can start building without the need for blocks. So one of the ways we can do that is we can make a function that checks for a crouch. What we're going to do is we're going to go if input.getKeyDown key code dot left control, and instead of doing that block, what we're going to do is we're just going to negate and we're going to return out. So if we don't have the crouch button down, we just don't do anything after the return statement. So now we can create a bool for crouching. Bool crouching. Let's auto set these to false. So we're gonna crouching equals true. Amazing. So, and now we're gonna crouch. Let's call crouch the player just to keep everything the same. So if we are not crouching, return. A lot simpler. So for the crouch, remember that we in the awake we grabbed a collider. So we're gonna do my collider dot, then the variables we want to use are the center offset. We want to make this -0.5 on the y. So real quick, so we're working with a capsule collider. We're just gonna specify this is a capsule collider, so we can have access to the center variable. So my collider dot center. So that's the new offset. And we're checking my collider dot height equals 1. So for crouching, it'll set the height to that. And then in the update, we need to check for it, just like that. So what we can do to do uncrouching is we can return back to our guard clause here. And instead of returning, if we're not pressing the crouch button, then we'll uncrouch, and then return. So that calls uncrouch every frame, but this is old input system, so it's fine. Boom, works. Uncrouch. So can't go through. Oh, I can go through now. Look at that, amazing. I made crouching spectacular. So that's just a little lesson on guard clauses. You can see that this is a lot cleaner than if I were to do an if and an else statement, right? Instead of using 2 whole blocks, we're just using 1 block because we have additional functionality here. And if we didn't have that functionality here, it would be 0 blocks. So no if else here. And we have the functionality of an if else essentially. So that's just a little thing that you can do. Try GetComponent, really helpful, helps a lot. And thank you for watching.